Video number 43. Gold. Golder yet golder. The YouTube keeps growing. The gold cutting deeper. Like readings negative. This next video seems very, very interesting. What do you two think?
Meh. 5 out of 10.
Yeah, it seems pretty boring.
God damn it, whatever. Hey there everybody, my name is Gold, and I don't know if you've been keeping up with Deltarune like I have, but we are getting alarmingly close to the end of this. Which means that we need to have some serious conversations about W.D. Gaster. Yes, him, right there, that man. He has caused me more trouble than I care to explain ever. Now, I'm making this video to explain to everybody who's not caught up on who he is and what he has to do with Deltarune, such that when the ending rolls around, you can say, oh man, that's entry number 17 guy. Alright, let's get into it. The first thing that I want to talk about is where W.D. Gaster actually comes from. Well, I mean, he might come from Deltarune, but that is not important. Originally, Undertale. So, in this room in Waterfall right here, if you get a certain fun value, which I'll go over in a second, you can run into this room. And inside is a sprite labeled Mystery Man. This has been theorized to be W.D. Gaster, although it is technically not proven, but at this point, if this is just some other random guy, this has been an incredible twist of fate. So, fun value. What is that? In Undertale, a random number would be generated for you, and that would decide how many different random events occur. So then you might be thinking, what number do you need to get this event? 66. Now, I'm not one to speculate about why that is, but the number 66 is very similar to the number 666, which is typically aligned with the devil and devil beliefs. Therefore, ooh, maybe he is more spooky than we first imagined. Anyway, now that we've got that out of the way, Dr. W.D. Gaster, what we really do know about him is that he was the original royal scientist before Alphys and had irreplaceable brilliance, according to the wiki. He created the core as well, which powers the entirety of the underground. However, it is stated that he fell into his creation and was shattered across time and space. The reason that we know this comes from another fun value thing. If you get other fun values, you can run into the Goners, which are gray forms of people that you see in Undertale, such as Monster Kid and then like a couple other Hotland residents. They say very, very interesting things. For instance, one of the first ones, Goner Kid, the Goner version of Monster Kid, says, have you ever thought about a world where everything is exactly the same, except you don't exist? Everything functions perfectly without you. Haha, that thought terrifies me. So, Goner Kid very much seems to be paralleling what happened to Gaster, because the world functions exactly the same, but as far as everyone knows, he no longer exists. In fact, I don't know how many people actually remember that he existed in the first place. There are also other Goners, such as Goner Gaster Follower 1. He says, it makes sense why Asgore took so long to hire a new royal scientist. After all, the old one, Dr. Gaster, what an act to follow. They say he created the core, however his life was cut short. One day he fell into his creation and will Alphys end up the same way? Now, that's where we get the core thing, obviously. Another one is Gaster Follower 2, who says Alphys might work faster, but the old royal scientist Dr. W.D. Gaster, one day he vanished without a trace. They say he's shattered across time and space. Haha, how can I say so without fear? I'm holding a piece of him right here. And finally, Gaster follower number 3. I understand why Asgore waited so long to hire a new royal scientist. The previous one, Dr. Gaster, his brilliance was irreplaceable. However, his life was cut short. One day his experiments went wrong and, well, I needn't gossip. After all, it's rude to talk about someone who's listening. And the final little bit is from River Person, who says, "Tra-la-la, beware of the man who speaks in hands." As well as, "Tra-la-la, beware of the man who came from the other world." Now, these are most likely talking about Dr. Gaster, considering that the man who speaks in hands, he speaks in wingdings, which, uses hand symbols. And for the one who came from the other world, previously stated that he was shattered across time and space. So, I mean, if he came from the other world, then that means that, hey, that's the one that River Person's talking about. So, that's all the story that we get on Dr. Gaster, except for in the True Lab, where you can read entry number 17. Entry number 17 is written entirely in wingdings, which is what the WD in WD Gaster stands for. It says as follows. Entry number 17. Dark, darker yet darker. The darkness keeps growing, the shadows cutting deeper, photons reading negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? So we don't actually know who Gaster's talking to here in this entry. However, there are a couple theories, such as Sans, which we'll get to later. Alfie's is also one that I've heard before, but I really don't buy that very much. But we'll get to all that momentarily. So, now that you know who Dr. Gaster is, we have to discuss why he's important to Deltarune. If you remember from entry number 17, the way he speaks is very, very specific. He speaks in all caps in wingdings, and he loves to use the word very as much as possible, it seems. So, in the very beginning of Deltarune, there is a sequence where you make your vessel. Now, we don't know who speaks here, however, based on their speaking pattern and style of speaking, it does seem very, very likely that Gaster is the one talking to you. Now, the reason as to why isn't very clear. It doesn't seem like Gaster would have any reason more so than just scientific curiosity to create a vessel, especially interface with some random soul. However, something that is important is that it seems like Gaster, at the very least, isn't the most powerful person in this universe, because someone was able to sort of hijack the vessel making experience and force us to be Chris. Another thing that sort of points to the fact that at least they are two different people is in the Japanese translation, what we believe to be Gaster talks only in katakana, which is one of the 3 writing systems for people who don't know ball like I do. That was a joke, I'm sorry. He speaks only in kanji and katakana, while the voice that follows up speaks in both kanji and hiragana. So it's 2 different writing styles, so it seems very, very clear that they're meant to be different in some way, shape, and or form. Another thing that I forgot to mention was that the name of the song in the Gunner Maker is Another Hymn, which starts off at 2% speed and rapidly increases to 96%, which remains as the final speed. The hymn in this track likely refers to Gaster's theme because in the Deltarune, in the Undertale files, the song that plays for Gaster, or Gaster's theme, is titled Hymn in the code. And also it has Gaster's leitmotif in it. That's not all that Gaster does for Deltarune either. He also could be the Forgotten Man. Now you might be wondering who's the Forgotten Man. Don't worry, I got you. The Forgotten Man is a character that can be found via going back and forth between 2 rooms in Chapter 1 and 2, by going nowhere in Chapter 3, and by following the right window in Chapter 4. Oh, and of course in Chapter 5, cutting the wheat. Now, The reason that we think this is Gaster is because of the shattered across time and space, and he seems to be outside of space. And also, to be the Forgotten Man would make sense for Gaster's character, given the fact that if he was shattered across time and space, people really wouldn't remember him. Especially because if it is the same Gaster from Undertale, then there's no reason to believe that anyone would know about him in Deltarune, other than, I guess, us. Anyway, whenever you speak to the man, he doesn't actually say anything, he just kind of gives you an egg in the first 2 chapters. However, in the 3rd chapter, he's able to speak, and he gives us some very, very interesting dialogue. The man asks if Chris will forget him. And if you say no, then he asks if you want to meet again. After that, the other choices are kind of inconsequential. However, he notes that this is the only place where he can still speak, which is something that is very, very, very interesting to me. I'm going to finish talking about the Forgotten Man first, but then I'm going to come back, so please remember Chapter 3. This is going to be very important later. In Chapter 4, it is basically the same in that he doesn't really speak. However, you don't actually see anything this time because Chris goes into like a hospital-esque room. What's different about this one is that it has a very Chris-centric theme to this one specifically. You interact with an easel and a sink. When you interact with the canvas, Chris begins to draw. And what it says is that Chris tried to draw what they saw behind the tree. However, they failed to do so multiple times, causing the canvas to be covered in a monochrome smear. This will be important later. Then, Chris paints a tree over everything. And then after that, you get the egg, and the man disappears. But then, you can approach the sink, and you'll try and wash your hands, but it will note that there are some things that cannot be washed away. Now, that's not very helpful for what we're talking about right now, but that is a very strange piece of dialogue, and something that I'm sure other people have talked about. Finally, we're going to get to Chapter 5. You cut the wheat in the section where you run back and forth, and eventually you'll water some flowers with the annoying dog, and you'll end up where the Forgotten Man is. However, if you've collected all 4 eggs before this, he will sort of gesture to Chris that they must not meet again. Like, Chris has everything that he can offer. Now, I'm sure you're wondering at this point why this is important, why it would matter if Gaster was the Forgotten Man. The reason that it's important is because the man remarks in Chapter 3 that he is slowly being forgotten. So, that means that Gaster is, 1, not as powerful as we think that he is, and number 2, it probably means that he was trying to give us a vessel for some purpose. Honestly, I'm not too sure that he is, but it would make sense unless the Forgotten Man is just supposed to be like some random other character, which, you know, Toby Fox does things like that, who knows. But it's fun to speculate, you know? And here's what I was talking about earlier. In Chapter 3, one of the 8-bit Rudens remarks that copies are monochrome. Now, the reason this matters for Gaster is because if you look at the door in the hallway of Waterfall, you will see that the door is black and white. Not only that, but the Goners, which are direct copies of other people we meet in Undertale, are also monochrome. And not just that, folks. In fact, the vessel that we were creating ourselves to inhabit was monochrome itself to begin with. Which then begs the question: is the Gaster that we may or may not see in Undertale the original Gaster, or is he just a copy? A copy of a man shattered across time and space. If he is actually just a copy, and the original is somehow in Deltarune now, I honestly don't know what that would mean for Gaster. Of course, he would still exist and be real, just somewhere that's not here. Somewhere forgotten. There's also another very interesting thing we got to talk about. W.D. Gaster, his name, is a font. W.D. Wingding. And then Gaster, Aster's a font. And so Gaster, Aster, there are other characters in this game whose names are fonts. And that is Papyrus and Sans, the Skeleton Brothers, whom we all love so very much. Now, why are these two important? Well, good news, they're not. Papyrus is not very important. Sans, however, is very, very interesting. Talking about entry number 17 again, it does seem very, very possible that Gaster was talking to both Sans and Papyrus. The only problem being that Papyrus doesn't seem to have any sort of knowledge or any sort of intelligence about any of this at all. However, he has some very interesting dialogues when you call him on the phone in specific locations. One such being when you call him in Alphys's lab and he remarks about the dog food that's there and says that he's seen it with Sans. So that means that Sans at least has some knowledge of the true lab. But that's not all, folks. There's even more. Sans is also in Deltarune. In fact, he's one of the few people who keeps, honestly, most of what you see from them in Undertale intact in Deltarune. I mean, his house is there. Grillby's is there. Like, it's basically everything that made Sans his own character, minus the hot dog stand. Now here's the deal, though. Why is Sans so special compared to everybody else? Well, in Chapter 5, Susie, Chris, and Noelle go up to Sans and they get some ice cream. Sans then asks them to fill out a punch card. Of course, Susie takes it, and she says that she's going to write Chris, herself, and Ralsei on the punch card, and it was said so that Sans would not forget them. Now, if you unlock the back room of Sans' house, you will find a postcard that has 3 smiling people on it, and in text is written, "Don't forget." So it seems very, very likely that what's actually happening here is that the Sans from Deltarune is actually the Sans in the past from the Sans in Undertale. But this introduces a whole new set of problems. Because if Gaster's originally from Undertale, and Sans is originally from Deltarune, and they, switched universes, I don't understand that. Honestly, I don't at all. I don't know what that would mean. Hey, Jacob from the future here. I realized that I am really dumb in this part, and it is so clear that they are both just from Deltarune, especially because of the copies are monochrome thing, and Gaster is black and white. I mean, it just makes so much. I don't know why I didn't get that here. It was probably because it was 2 in the morning when I recorded that part. So I just thought I'd come in, leave it in there, because, just to show you I can be stupid too. And come on here and say this. Okay, let's get back to it. I mean, if you look at it that way, it is very possible that if Sans and Papyrus came in and Gaster was going out, that there was a brief period of time where Sans mentioned that he was from a different world or something, and then Gaster sort of saw that, and whenever creating the core, created something to try and help Sans get back to his original timeline, and that's what he fell into, shattering him across time and space. This would be the reason for the broken machine inside Sans' house. More than likely, it's the very thing that he tried to use to get back home and then broke. Hence the line in the genocide fight where he says, "I gave up trying to go back a long time ago." We know that this is not referring to getting to the surface, as Sans has also said that getting to the surface does not appeal to him anymore also. So there's always been a theory that he's talking about something else. But now we have a much better clue on what he's actively referring to. Another very popular thing, moving on from Sans, is that Gaster resides inside the bunker. Specifically, because we know that there's a dark world inside the bunker, maybe Gaster is able to exist within a specific time in a specific space when inside of a dark world. Perhaps, in fact, that's where his original self lies to begin with. As noted in entry 17 again, he was talking about the dark world as he says, dark, darker, yet darker, photons reading negative. Obviously, you can't have negative photons. Photons are not like something that you can have negative of because they make light, and darkness is not a thing. It's the absence of light. And so therefore to have negative photons would mean some sort of horrible, horrible black hole mess in real life. But not important. For this case, it's referring to the dark worlds. In fact, maybe that's how Sans was going to get back. Maybe the Dark World has some sort of power to get him back. Maybe that's how the Shadow Crystals work. Their will that they have, as Sham puts it, gives them some sort of way to, when combined together, transcend things they never thought they could before. Speaking of Shadow Crystals, we do need to talk about Gaster's involvement with the secret bosses. Most namely, Spamton and Jevil. They both went mad/crazy after interacting with some sort of garbage noise, or at least that was Spamton. Spamton went crazy after finding some garbage noise. Jevil, it seems that he was just revealed some secret of the universe, and that turned him crazy. So they're definitely talking about Gaster. I mean, garbage noise, that's Gaster's like whole thing. He loves garbage noise. He talks about it all the time at book club. I can't get him to stop talking about it. And Jevil, I mean, once Jevil found out he was in a game, I mean, that sounds like a very Gaster thing, too. Of course, it's all speculation. I have no reason to believe that, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. So if Gaster is the one who made Dark Worlds, as said in entry 17, that makes a very bootstrap paradox with everything else that I've just said. And, you know, I don't know if Gaster could both be the Forgotten Man and be in the bunker at the same time, or if that's two different people, or if it's the same person, or if he's so shattered across time and space that it doesn't matter. What I do know is that eventually enough things will be explained to where we can come to probably a better conclusion than I have. Well, that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I tried to get everything that I could think of into this video. It was all made in one sitting. I just needed to make something. And so if this is imperfect, or if you have addendums you would like me to make in a second video, you can leave comments down below and tell me if you have any theories about Gaster, because I'd love to talk about more Deltarune stuff. In fact, I have another video that I'm writing right now. But until that comes out, you're just going to have to subsist on my like 3 videos that I made, which I actually don't even stand by a couple of them anymore. Honestly, I think a lot of the things I said in those were wrong and I really wasn't paying attention enough, but that is not important. What is that it's rude to talk about someone who's listening. But that's going to do it for me, folks. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.